Hello, and we are live. I am being joined today by a very special guest, Kermit the Frog, who doesn't normally work with Blue Highway Games, but he decided to make a very special appearance. He is got a frog in his throat, so he's unable to speak. But he is here because we are featuring green games. We're feeling a little green at Blue Highway. I probably should have saved this for March 17th for St. Patrick's Day, but I didn't. So we're just going to feature some green games. It's always good to be green, right, Kermit? So, yep, we are live. This is the live stream. You're on that camera. And we are going to be talking about games where the box is green. There's probably absolutely nothing else to connect any of these games other than the color green being featured on the box. So if you were hoping for something much more detailed, I'm sorry to say that there is not, but that's okay. Green is enough. All right, I'm going to have to set you down in the peanut gallery over here so you can watch. Is that right? Yeah, okay, great. I've been in quarantine for way too long. Our first game is actually going to be the one I'm going to show you on camera because it is our youngest game for families ages 10 plus, so not super young. Kind of like Sushi Go. And this game is called Abandon All Artichokes. And this is one of the best green boxes I've ever seen. It's a tin. It's in the shape of an artichoke. And although the game is about getting rid of your artichokes and trying not to have any of them, who doesn't love an artichoke? I know I do. I love all vegetables, and this game has all of them. The object of the game is to get rid of all the artichokes that you start the game with. So you have nothing else other than artichokes in your hand. You have a little deck to draw from that are also artichokes. And your job is to take and harvest these vegetables to add them into your hand. They'll get discarded, and as you cycle through your deck over some various rounds, you'll be able to, hopefully, get rid of the artichokes. The first player who can draw a full hand of 5 cards that has all other vegetables and no artichokes goes, I have abandoned all artichokes, and won the game. And the cards themselves are really straightforward. So at the start of your turn, you're going to pick one from the center face up and add it to your hand. It can be used immediately. And the cards have fun different little actions, like you and an opponent each reveal a random card. If you're going to discard both of those artichokes, or you're otherwise going to swap them. And I shouldn't say discard, because discard is your own pile. The term here is compost, which I love because they're vegetables. And that actually means to get out of your hand and kind of put it in this compost pile, which you can't see off camera here, that's off to the side of the draw deck. And that's great because if you both revealed artichokes, you're sort of working together, you both get to get rid of an artichoke. But maybe your opponent's like, I don't want to let you get rid of one of your artichokes, and they show you a vegetable they don't really care about, and then you end up swapping your vegetables. But it goes into your hand, you would play that down. If you have nothing left in your hand other than artichokes or cards that don't really work right now, you can just go ahead and discard them, and that's the end of your turn. You draw back up. Well, actually, it's not the end of your turn. You draw back up to 5. You flip it over. If they are all other vegetables, you'd win the game. Otherwise, you're ready for the next your next turn. This would fill back up, getting some different variety of vegetables. We got an onion here. It's one of my personal favorites because he looks a little bit pissed off, and I'm not entirely sure why. Onions are so sweet. Compost an artichoke, put this card on top of another player's discard pile. So he kind of moves around in the game, so he's not going to stay in your hand. It'll end up on a player's discard, not compost that we talked about. Carrots are also great as your only play action. Compost exactly 2 artichokes along with this card. So this card would go away. There's not very many carrots in the deck, but it does get you to get rid of 2 artichokes in one go. And so on and so forth. I don't need to go through all of them, although they are all adorable, and I feel like you need to see like the potato. And what else? I stacked these up here. The corn. Isn't he handsome? He's a handsome corn. And a leek, which is my personal favorite because I think leeks are the most amazing vegetable of all time. I could eat leeks every day. And guess what? My husband, who I cook for all the time, he does not like leeks as much as I do. They're so good. All right, so all vegetables are wonderful. Abandon All Artichokes is a great game. It's ages 10 plus. It's only $12.99 normally, and it will be 20% off through next Thursday. Now, I should say, if you're watching this live, feel free to ask questions. And also, if you're watching this live or on YouTube, the Snowpocalypse 2021, of course, some of these discounts may be hard for you to get up to the store to get, or the store is closed because of snow. I just don't know yet. Right now, everything's operating as normal because the roads are clear. But do call in the store to double check, and you can also order them online, and that way you'll get the discount even if you can't get up to the store until after the snow melts, which we may or may not get. But right now there is white snow on the roof cross giving you this extra glow here today. If you're watching this later, then who cares? All right, the next game that I have for you is another card game. I was gonna hopefully just kind of shove this other one off to the side to give you a close-up because it's really it's interesting. It's if you've not tried Friedman Freeze games, they are almost always start with an F, and they're, I think, almost always in a green box. So I could have done a whole session on Friedman Freeze, and maybe I will in the future, in which case those games will also all be green. But the one I chose today was kind of one that I hadn't really played until recently, and it isn't one that gets a lot of attention. It's called Fortune. It's one of these little fable games. Now, yes, you can see my mess that I created. This is the deck that you would see when you pull it out of the box. And these fast forward games, what's interesting about them is you don't have a rule book in the box. You literally are going to learn the rules of the game as you're playing. It tells you what you need to do right away. This says do not shuffle the cards. If somebody's curious and looks at the back, it's like, hey, this is the last card. Don't shuffle. Turn it over. Keep playing. So you'd have the cards like this. You don't need anyone to read the rules. You'd read this out loud and you'd get going. When you do future plays of the game, the cards are numbered, so you'll be able to put them back into the correct order. Once you get down to a certain area, you're going to be winning hands and shuffling and doing things that would normally break those numerical rules. But you don't know what to do until you go through the game. So you'd read the first card, it tells you what to do, you'd leave that face up, and then you start drawing cards for people's hands. And I don't want to even give away too much because if you've played Fabled Fruits or any of these other Fable games from Friedman Freeze, they all have the same principle where you might not get all the rules until a few plays into the game. The game itself comes with a little plastic baggie, so you can put the cards that you've already experienced in one set and then the ones that you haven't in the box. That way, when you start again, you can come at the same knowledge point that you were when you left off before, which might not include all the rules of the game and not have seen all the cards in the deck. Now, Fabled Fruits is one that the game went on and on for quite some time. Like, you would play... you would only make small advances in each game, so the experience would go on longer. I imagine this one, you could make your way through that whole deck within one evening, or maybe even just a couple. So the fun of it isn't really in the discovery, but it's kind of neat because you don't need to read the rule books, and there's a few things to learn, not very many rules, as you work your way through the deck. The gameplay, just so you get a basic idea, is sort of like a slot machine in Vegas or something, I don't know, but you're collecting numbers and you want to score points. The higher the numbers you have, the better. But as the game goes on and more cards are introduced, you might have cards that give you bonuses for getting all odd numbers or all of one kind of number. And then there's eventually a discard pile that gets introduced. But again, I don't want to give away everything because it's sort of the initial time you play. There's a few fun discoveries to be had as you work your way through the deck. So that is Fortune from Friedman Freeze, and his games are the F games in the green boxes, and if you ever see him at a convention, he has green hair and green clothes, and he should be here instead of Kermit the Frog as my guest, but COVID. Alright, and as we all know, frogs cannot get COVID. Alright, my last small box game for you today is one that I don't need the camera for. You may have noticed that I am wearing a little pin today, but you probably can't see this pin. I've now attached it to my clothes, but it says Tokyo Game Show Host. And it does in fact come in the box of Tokyo Game Show, which is a Jordan Draper game. I believe he lived and worked in Japan for a long time and takes a lot of the influence from Japanese culture and games. His rule books are usually translated into Japanese as well. But I think he doesn't live in Japan now. I think he lives in the States. But so you may be familiar with that style of art. This is one of the newer ones, and it is a game where you are going to break up into teams, and it comes with bracelets. Not even teams. You can be playing it yourself. So you actually are going to peg yourself as a color. Everybody's going to be wearing one of these bracelets so they can identify themselves. When the die is rolled, it will match up to the color of wristband that you're wearing, which means that you might be the first person that has to go in one of the game categories. There are so many little mini games. Each one of these cards is just a separate little mini game. Because it's nice to have it language independent, the first few times you play, you have to reference the rule book. And again, this is half Japanese, but there's like 50 some games in here, and you could even coordinate some of the games with some of his other titles and components from his Tokyo series, which, if you don't already know, some of them have the most amazing little components inside the box that I've ever seen on any games. They're adorable. This one comes with glow-in-the-dark discs, which you can't see because the lights are on, but there's some where you're supposed to play with the lights off. And the games that are in here range all over the place. There's dexterity games where you will be competing against the opponents to stand and try to throw those tokens into the box. There are points that you can be earned for winning some things, but then there's games where the host has you all leave the room and then hides these around the room like a big old Easter egg hunt, and you can only claim one token. And so if you find a 1, do you keep that token because you might not find another, or do you try to find a larger number token? And there's word games, and there's charade games, and acting out games, and it's a party game in a box, like you would be on a game show in Japan competing against your family members to try to get the most points. You can totally play without points. That's not necessary. There's just a lot of fun in the game. And the wrist bracelets, I believe, I haven't played all the games, so maybe some of them include the wrist bracelets, but they're to identify you as a player color. And the host gets to wear this fabulous little pin, which is actually an enamel pin. So if you're a pin collector, maybe this game is for you as well. So normally it is $39.95, and it is on sale for 20% off this whole week, and along with his other series of games, which if you haven't checked any of them out, they're really neat and all very different. Okay, and now I have 2 big box games for you. The first is kind of the more family-oriented one, or lighter game, and it's called ReNature, or ReNature, but I think it's ReNature because I think you're like renaturing the world. And it's by Wolfgang Kramer and Michael Kiesling, and they are 2 of my favorite designers. They've worked separately on games for many, many years, and they've also worked collaboratively as a team. They made a game recently called Paris that was close to my heart, and some of the older Mask series games, such as Tikal and Mexica, and they're all over the place. They, I believe Wolfgang Kramer was the first person to make game design his full-time job. Maybe that's not true, but I believe the box told me that it was. So ReNature is his newest game with Michael Kiesling, and the 2 of them have created a game of repopulating nature with your animal dominoes. So the game is an open board that has sort of river spaces and I don't know, areas that are brown, that are dirt, that need to be renatured. And a box full of fabulous dominoes. So they are these substantial wooden pieces. There's 55 of them with the combinations, I think, of 11 different animals. I don't know. 6 different animals. Math is my favorite. But they're double-sided like you would see dominoes. So instead of numbers like 6 and 2, we have woodpecker and bat. And you definitely have the double dominoes of certain things, or like owl and snail. I really like the red squirrel and the salamander. And like a normal dominoes game, you'd split the dominoes up amongst the players. You have some that are in your reserve. You have some that you can set on the table in front of you because they're really nice and hefty, so you can see your hand of dominoes. And on your turn, you're going to place them out on the board. They do have to match with animals. They have to go on the river spaces. They don't go onto the land spaces, because the land spaces are covered with points. And what you're trying to do with points. I know you're very excited to see these points. So they've got these point tokens on them, and you are battling to surround those areas with tiles. Whenever you place, you can add one of your colored trees, your nature. When the area is completely surrounded, there's a little battle. You establish the value, and each of the different sizes tree that you have 4 different sizes, has different value, 1, 2, 3, 4. You add up all of your components and all your opponent's components, and whoever has the highest total is going to get the bigger number, and the second place finisher gets the next highest number. However, if anyone has played Las Vegas, it has a ties are neutral and are eliminated. So I love that mechanic. And like Las Vegas, if 2 people have the same amount, they're canceling each other out and the next person gets it. So if Joe has 3 and Sally has 3 and I have 1, Sally and Joe cancel each other out. I have 1, I get the most points. So you're battling and playing, but you have to have the domino placed next to the area. Then you can place one of your available shrubberies, and there's a grass bush. I know you want to see them. You're dying. You're like, please show me the grass and the little shrub, the bush, the little evergreen tree, and wait for it. The 4-pointer is an oak. Now this oak, you have them in your player colors, but in each of the different sizes, you also have neutral colors, which can be used to try to thwart some of these area control fights. So if I know that Joe and Sally have 3, or one of them has 4, and the neutral, I could pop in a 4 neutral, I'm eliminating Sally, giving the points to Joe, because Joe's a nicer person. So those are the components for ReNature. You're populating the board with those dominoes. You're trying to surround the areas in order to get the points. At the end of the game, the areas that weren't surrounded are still going to score, so there's still worth to put out on some of those areas, even if you can't get them fully surrounded. The only benefit is, kind of like in some of those Carcassonne games, is whoever finishes the city, you get to claim the things in the Traders and Builder one. In this one, whoever finishes surrounding it also gets to claim these tiles, and they have some hidden points on the back that you get to look at, but your opponents don't know how much they're worth, and they're sort of randomized until the end of the game. So you might score quite a few points from having these left over. You say, but what if you can't place a domino? There are wild domino, the characters themselves, which you can control by spending some clouds that you have in the game, and then you can adjust which animal is wild, which makes it wild on the board, so you can put anything next to it, or if you have it in your hand, if I have a red squirrel and it's wild, I can put it next to any animal, which helps you be able to get a lot of your dominoes down, but you have to have the clouds to get to place them. So it was a wonderful little family game, played with 2 players. It comes with more components for 2, so that you can spread out. It takes a little bit longer than when you're playing with 3 or 4, as far as, because you have more pieces and more dominoes per person to get rid of. But ultimately, it was like a half-hour game. It was very easy to learn, but it was quite satisfying. Like, one I want to play over and over. I probably never will get to, because I have to learn new games, but and it would be a great addition to your collection. It is a newer game, and it's $49.95. It'll be 20% off through next Thursday. All right, the last one I have is not what I had initially picked out for this week for green, but we were sold out of the game that I had chosen, which was Village Green. So instead, I had just picked up this copy of Merv, and now Merv is one that I played this year, so I had a chance to try it out, which was rare, and I knew I had to get my own copy. And yes, it's pretty orange, but the box is really quite green as well, if you don't look on the inside. And it worked, and I already knew it, and it's a bigger board game. It's a bigger strategy game, so the only one I have like that this week. And it is A game where you are have very few turns, and on your turn you're going to be selecting an action to do, and the action is in one of the different kind of little areas around the board. And at the end of 4 turns, you'll do some scoring, and then you'll do 4 more turns, and then you'll do some scoring, and 1 more time. At the last 2 rounds, there's also invasion that happens to this poor city of Merv, and I believe it's based on historical setting where the Mongols invaded and killed like 700,000 people, so it's a very sad period of history of this poor town Merv. If I could travel back in time, I wouldn't go anywhere fabulous. I'd probably go to all the ancient libraries of the world, and I just found out that this must have had an incredible library of scrolls that got destroyed. I would love to go back to, I don't know, the 12th century and visit Merv. But, so I can't, but I can play this board game. And so you have to protect the buildings that you've placed in the middle on your turns previously from those invasions. And between all those things, you'll hopefully get lots of points. Now, I always can never unfold these giant boards on this live stream, but the idea is you're going to be placing, there's buildings out on here, and they're randomly placed each game to keep you some variety. And then on each of the sides of the square, there are spaces. And this is kind of where the fun, interesting mechanic of the game is when you take your turn, you move your meeple to one of the free spaces, and then you look into the column and look at all those buildings, and you choose one that you want to activate. If it doesn't have a building in it, you get to claim it with your building and do the action, as well as claim resources. If you have other buildings of your color in that column, you'd be able to get extra resources and still take that action. You can always choose a building that has or a square that has somebody else's building in it. You just don't get to place your own building there, but you still get to do the action if you need to do that. And then once you choose your action and take your resource, the spaces that are around the board are where most of those actions are taking place. There's sort of this mosque area where, I don't know if you can see, but you have to have certain colored cubes, and you pay the cubes, and as many cubes as you have, you can move as far as you want, and there's rewards that happen as you move up the path, things that you get for moving into those spaces that will help you get better rewards when you go on buildings, or when you're building the walls, which is one of these actions up here. If you build walls, you're going to be able to get influence in the, which helps you collect cards. So they all sort of start to connect to each other. The walls that you build are going to protect your buildings from the invasion, but if you protect your opponents and yourself, you might get extra points for protecting their buildings and not just your own, and maybe you're doing it just to move on this track in order to buy the cards. So there's reasons there why you'd want to do something that maybe is for your opponent. The cards themselves are sort of like set collecting. If you get pairs of things, you'd be able to get special rewards, and then if you have sets of different cards at the end of the game, you'll get points. And you can have multiple sets of cards, and then there's also a space on the board that allows you to be getting points and scoring for different sections that you have a high presence in. So if you really focus on moving up in the moss track as well as get the scoring that corresponds to that, you might end up with a lot of points. Or if you get a lot of cards, you might be able to get a lot of points if you put your character in the palace in the right place for scoring points corresponding to cards. But of course, to get those cards, I needed to have built walls to move along the influence track. So there's, I think, 4 or 5 different spaces that you can be focusing on. And how you balance between them all is how you advance in the game. And the mechanic in the center where you move around is just, I'm sure I've seen it in other games, but bloop. So when you place on your side, on the top, you're working with columns. When you place on the side, you're thinking about rows and not columns. But when it comes time to reset for the next turn, the player who's farthest back from the next corner is the person who moves into the first available space, so the end. But if they don't want to go last, they can pay camels to fill in the spots that they don't want to go. So if they want to go first, they could pay 3 camels and go into that first player spot in a 4-player game. Then the third person would have to then go into the 4th player spot or pay camels, even if there's already camels there, until they claim a spot. When you take a spot that has camels, you get camels. And why are camels good? Because they allow you to bend and twist a few of the rules, like taking cards that might not be available, or grabbing resources in the desert, which I didn't even talk about. and move farther in the desert. So everything sort of has this very intuitive way of working back and forth. I found it quite elegant to play. It is not green, but it's pretty to look at on the table. And it has a solo version, which I haven't played. So 2-player was good, 3 players good. I haven't tried solo. But of course I will be doing that soon because quarantine. And that is normally $64.95. It will be 20% off. It's a new game, so we don't normally discount any of our new stuff. So that's maybe now the time to pick that up while supplies last. Again, as I said earlier, for those who have just joined us, if there's snow this weekend, that may change hours of the store. It may change your ability to get up here, but you can still purchase things on our website and pick them up later after the snow melts and it's safe to travel up onto Queen Anne. Well, I'm gonna take a few seconds to pause and bring back Kermit, my speechless Kermit. What'd you think? You have fun? Oh yes. I can't. Oh, your arms aren't gonna flail. Flaily arms. Ah. Okay. So green games that have nothing to do with each other other than that they're green. Thank you. Yes, Kermit. If you weren't here at the beginning, Kermit made an appearance early in the show, but then he had to go watch from the peanut gallery. He's lost his voice. He can't speak, and I didn't want to get in trouble. A, attempting to speak for him, or B, using recording, and I'm sure Disney would come after me. But this is a Kermit, and he's older than I am, so a little worse for wear there, but. Celebrating all things green. Thank you for joining me. If anyone has any questions after, or if they're watching this later on YouTube, feel free to call into the store. There are people in there. Even if you don't want to go in, they'll still be able to answer your questions in store, as well as on Facebook. We try to we try to answer questions as well. And we had a few viewers today, so thanks for joining us, Pinball Sorcerer and Slug Biker. It's always good to see people here and hear feedback from watching it later on YouTube. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful week.